Hey, and welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving into a philosophical idea that is, well, it's pretty out there. It's a theory that takes some of our most basic assumptions about what it means to be a good person and throws them right out the window. We are going to investigate ethical egoism.
So let me just start by asking you this. Just think about it for a second. What if everything you've ever been taught about helping others, about sacrifice, about compassion, what if all of that was just wrong? What if, when it comes right down to it, the only person you ever had a moral duty to was yourself?
And that, right there, is the core of ethical egoism. It's this idea that our number one moral rule, our only moral rule, is to look out for number one. It kind of tosses out all those common ideas we hear about generosity and self-sacrifice. Now, according to an ethical egoist, you can help other people, sure, but only if doing so is ultimately going to benefit you. Okay, so here's our game plan. We're going to dig into this pretty radical idea, and we'll start by looking at two of the biggest arguments people make for it. Then we're going to put those arguments on the stand, see how they hold up, and uncover a really surprising contradiction. You know, as we've seen, ethical egoism just completely flips our normal understanding of morality upside down. It's suggesting that things we usually think of as vices, like being selfish, are actually the very foundation of being a moral person. That is a huge claim, so let's start looking at the evidence. All right, let's bring in our first piece of evidence. Our source material calls this one the self-reliance argument. And you can see why. It's probably one of the most common sense arguments you'll hear for an egoist point of view. The logic here seems pretty simple, right? It goes like this. Premise 1. If we all just focused on taking care of ourselves, society as a whole would run a lot more smoothly. I mean, you know what you need better than anyone else, right? Premise 2. We should always do whatever makes everyone better off. So the conclusion seems to follow, we should all just mind our own business. Sounds pretty plausible, but let's just hang on to that thought for a minute. Okay, next up is Exhibit B, the libertarian argument. This angle tries to get to egoism by focusing on ideas of personal freedom and what we really owe to other people, if anything. So the thinking here goes like this. Any duty you have to help another person has to come from one of two places. Either you chose it, you consented, like making a promise, or you have to fix a harm you caused. So if neither of those things are true, the argument concludes that you have absolutely zero moral duty to help them. Your life, your time, your money, it's all yours. Okay, we've heard the opening statements, the case for ethical egoism. Now it's time to see if these arguments can really hold their own. We're going to put them under the microscope. The cross-examination is about to begin. So let's go back to that first argument, the self-reliance one. Remember that first premise? That everyone is better off if we all just mind our own business. But is that really actually true? Our source gives us this incredibly powerful scenario to think about. I mean, the answer is just obvious, isn't it? Of course you're not better off. You're desperately worse off if that person just walks by. That whole first premise seems to just fall apart in a real-world crisis. But you know, there's an even bigger issue with the self-reliance argument. It's in that second premise. We ought to do what makes everyone better off. You see the problem here? There's a total clash of goals. The argument is using a group goal, the good of everybody, to justify a philosophy that only cares about one thing, your own personal benefit. An egoist can't actually agree with that premise. And this is the real kicker, right from the source material. For an egoist, the one and only moral duty is to maximize your own benefit. The greater good is totally irrelevant unless it just so happens to also help you. So the self-reliance argument is trying to build its case on a principle that egoism itself flat out rejects. It's a fatal flaw in the logic. So what about that second argument, the libertarian one? Well, this is where things get really fascinating. It turns out that this piece of evidence doesn't just fail to support egoism, it actually ends up contradicting it. The evidence literally turns against itself. Just imagine this scenario. You make a promise, but keeping it turns out to be a huge pain, really costly for you. What do? Well, libertarianism, which is based on consent, says you have to keep it. You gave your word. But what does egoism say? It says your only duty is to your self-interest. So if keeping the promise hurts you more than it helps, you actually have a moral duty to break it. They're telling you to do the exact opposite things. So after all that, what's the final verdict from our investigation? Well, the self-reliance argument just doesn't work. Its main premise is often false, and its goal is one an egoist can't even accept. And the libertarian argument?
it fails too, because it ends up giving advice that directly clashes with egoism. That case that seemed so simple and provocative, turns out it's built on some really shaky ground.
And that leaves us right here with this one final massive question. If ethical egoism doesn't hold up, if our only duty isn't just to ourselves, then where do our obligations to other people actually come from? Why should we help that person having a heart attack? It's a question that forces us to look way beyond the easy answers and right into the heart of what morality is all about. Definitely something to think about.